Hello Wizards, it's Stoyan and I'm here with Samo Mullur to analyze his Triton Main Event final table from September 2025 in Jeju. A young man that took the poker world by storm, winning the WSOP Paradise 25K in 2023 for almost $3 million. Since then, he has continued climbing the high-stakes ladder thanks to his outstanding ability to focus and execute. A young man that took the poker world by storm with his PSPC win and proved himself at the highest stakes possible. Sam, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to look back into these spots, as this was my biggest final table that I played to this date, and some really big names, players that I look up to on that final table. So yeah, I'm excited. Thanks for having me. Let's get into it.
This is how the chip counts look like. We see some really big names in the poker world and some players who are not so well known. In our first hand, Wu Kuizong opened UTG, and then you're on the hijack. So he opened the low jack, and you're on the hijack with king, queen off. You decide to 3-bet that hand a bit more than 2.5x, very close to 2.5x of 30-something big blinds. So looking at that, what do you think was the right play with king, queen off?
Yeah, it's interesting because, as I said in the introduction, our villain in this hand, he's here to play. Like he's been 3-betting the chip leader all the time. Like he's opening a lot of hands. He's not necessarily the kind of guy that's gonna fold to 3-bets much, I would say, or I would think. Um, uh, but he hasn't faced much like back play from the final table because we've played with him final 2 tables as well, and it was kind of same story. So in general, on this final table, there was this vibe of, okay, obviously, let's just let this guy do his thing. We stay out of the way a little bit because you just benefit from him putting too many chips into the middle against especially the covering at the big stacks. So do I want to bluff 3-bet a guy like that? On average, probably less so. This is a spot where like he's been opening a lot. He's been 3-betting himself a lot. But actually, like him facing 3-bets is not something that happened as frequently. Now, it's a distribution where I not really incentivized to flat many hands, like probably ace queen suited, ace jack suited, your typical candidates like king queen suited. But with this dynamic of everyone knowing him being that crazy, like I think I would have not played any flats here because my flatting range is just so face up and kind of weak against a player like that because my value like also always just 3-bets. So I would expect to get squeezed quite a bit. So personally in this spot, I would have played no flats. And then like, because I'm not 100% sure that he's like not folding anything versus 3-bets, I still want to choose some of my best bluffing candidates pre-flop, I think. And king queen off, ace queen off, like these hands, I think are prime candidates, and that's how I ended up 3-betting this hand in game.
I really like the idea of not having a flatting range here, or almost not having a flatting range. First of all, the risk premium is pretty high. Big blind has 15 big blinds. You're in the middle of the pack. And once you flat there, although you can probably outplay him post-flop, the other players who are very good players for the most part can really put you on a very specific range. And that's why I think you went with the right decision to not play many flats. The solver also wouldn't flat here at a final table with that high risk premium from these positions, or at least very, very low frequency. But now the question is, knowing that he plays so many hands, or he opens more than the solver, significantly wider than the solver, what assumptions did you make about him facing a 3-bet? And since you have a lot of good candidates for 3-bet bluff, like ace 10 off, ace jack off, ace queen off, king queen off, a bunch of suited hands as well containing blockers, and that stack size blockers are very important. Would you expand on the bluffing range, thinking that he opens a lot and then folds to a 3-bet? Or would you expand because you think you can win the pot post-flop very often if he peels, being able to range him and to know his range more or less? Or would you just stay away and pick only the best bluffs like king, queen off, and the ones you said ace, queen off, ace, jack off? How would you approach that spot in practice?
So I think it's also there's more things that need to go into this. Like in the spot where I skip this three bet and he goes up against the big blind, on average, in general, with him too many chips go into the middle, he's gonna be all in way more by the river than he's supposed to. Stuff like that. All these things have to go and be influenced into my decision making. So I would say once you go into this like territory, it becomes combo dependent as well. Like if I had a hand like ace queen off that always like crushes his flats, um, sure, I'm not gonna encase this combo, which I don't think would ever not three bet. I would do it with that hand always, and then I would skip on an ace 10 more often where he always flats ace jack off against the three bet and stuff. So I think once you go into this like very exploitative and also like considering future game to the deepest possible or like humanly possible levels, I think you can just look at your combo a little bit more than your entire range. And yeah, I still think as I said, he hasn't faced many three bets, as he was mostly the guy that was pressing like or open raising or three betting. So yeah, I still went with this hand, and I think I even went pure in game.
Yeah, so you were randomizing and you decided to just go 100% with that hand. Well,
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily randomize against a guy like that, but I just think with this specific hand, I didn't have much of a decision, as I still think he's gonna have folds against three bets.
yeah, makes sense. And he did fold ace 10 off, which seems like a really easy fold, but you never know when you're playing against an unknown, very aggressive player. So that worked well for you. Let's jump into the next one. Another blind war here between you and Christoph. He has, again, the bigger stack, about 36 big blinds, and you have a bit more than 20. Cutoff is below 10 big blinds, I think 9 point something. So that again puts a lot of pressure on you. Christoph decides to limp here, 10-9 off. He should be putting a lot of pressure from the small blind, raising normal in and then open shoving a lot as well, and not really limping so much. So what did that limp make you think in game, and why did you do what you did with pocket sixes there?
So yeah, I personally think that Christoph is a very good player, and he's aware of the situation, like how that he can shove quite some hands, that he can VPIP a lot. And whenever that's the case, like it's super easy in my opinion to like whenever you face the limp, it's kind of easy for it to just be very little traps and just expand your limping range from the hands that especially want to limp call and don't face aggression and are like fringe to open jam. Like I think a hand like this should always jam probably. Um, but whenever so it's more like these hands where he's not so comfortable jamming with like 9-5 suited, 9-6 suited, um, 10-8, stuff like that. And I personally thought in game that he's slightly weaker here, and I decided to ISO my hand. Not necessarily saying it's great looking back. I do think that I'm gonna face limp call quite a bit, to be honest. But there's some hands in range like the mentioned 9-5s, Jack 5 suited type hands that he might limp slightly more often than I think he's supposed to. So whenever that's the case, I still do okay to well against these hands. Yeah, I felt like I could generate more folds here. Sometimes also it's about some feeling like timings and stuff, and you think your opponent is weaker than they are potentially. Stuff like that matters. And yeah, I thought that race is nice here, but looking back, I'm not quite sure because I think against that perceived range, I go post flop quite a bit.
So for the audience that hasn't solved as many sims as you, uh, that might be surprising to talk to talk about checking pocket sixes. But really, when we think about how ranges look like, um, we should certainly put our value threshold higher than when we're playing for chips. Playing for chips with pocket sixes here, we really have no decision. We're always going to be raising, never really thinking about checking back, right? But at the final table with such a high risk premium, we start raising a lot stronger. And he decides to limp call. Flop is 985, and Christoph checks. First of all, um, what do you think about his strategy here? It seems like a texture that hits him kind of okay if he starts limp calling hands. Certainly, he has more um, 9-8, 9-7, 8-7 if he starts limp calling. Do you think leading makes sense from the small blind?
Yes, I do. I do think there's a significant amount of leading here. Like it connects so well with his limb calls, and I think equities run pretty close here. Uh, I'm thinking potentially, again, in reality, like I think he might be slight equity favorite. Again, here I saw a solution as well, but I do think that leading here makes a lot of sense because he connects so well with his bottom limb calls, which is the heuristic to use here, in my opinion. And that being built around the offsuit 9x, like this offsuit region, offsuit 8x, offsuit 9x, that just connects here very, very good. Uh, yeah, so I do think leading makes sense. Do I think Christoph was considering leading here? Probably, I'm not sure. The thing is, like, he always sometimes with people based on their timings. Christoph always takes his time, so I cannot necessarily read into that. I could make assumptions about how well he studied in ICM post swap, and if I do think he's not in this specific in this specific spot not as well studied, then I could potentially assume he's not leading, or at least not leading to the frequency that he should, which I think is easy to underdo. And for that reason, I, in position, in general, would think I can, in this spot against certain opponents, check back more. In case someone snap checks that flop from the small blind, you just check range and see what happens on turns. So yeah, I do think leading makes sense, and I do think adjusting based on how much you think your opponent leads from the small blind um, does make sense as well and has significant impact on your strategy.
Yeah, makes total sense. If he has to lead some frequency, meaning he has to lead his two pair, his straight, his whatever strong hands he has. Once he checks, he has all of these strong hands in his checking range, and for you, now you're facing a range that has a lot more strong hands, and you know, having that high risk premium, you're not really happy if you get it in uh, with equities running 50-50 or close to that. So it makes sense to check back a lot more, especially against players that are not leading. Uh, of course, we don't know if Christoph is leading this texture. Probably he is, but as you said, lower frequency than the solver. It's just hard to nail that frequency here. That's a quite tough spot, I would say. But if we consider that he's playing GTO and leading the right amount, what would you do with pocket sixes?
I think pocket sixes is a really nice hand to just check back close to always. Like it's a hand that like you don't get value from I mean you get value from some worse hands, but again he can open jam the offsuit Broadway stuff like Jack 10 off, 10-9 off. Uh I mean 10-9 not being a worse hand, but like Queen Jack off potentially even mixing, I don't know. So you really have a hand that's gonna struggle across like um, especially if it faces more aggression on the flop, where you have a gut shot and it's not thrilling to get it in here at this high of an SPR still. So I do think that pocket sixes falls into a very clear and natural check back. To realize equity, you have showdown, and you can always see rivers as well, having that added equity. So for me, quite a clear check back. I think I didn't randomize or anything. I would check this pure.
Yeah, I really like that. And this is how you protect your checking back range. Of course, on a 6, on a 7, he's likely to bluff quite a lot, which will be very, very good for your stack most of the time. So let's see what the wizard thinks here. So we do see quite a high lead out of the small blind on this texture. Equities run very, very close. Slight favorite is a small blind here, 54 to 46. And then slight favorite in the nutted hands category, having, more of two pairs, and generally hitting that texture a little bit better. In that uh, in that regard, we can assume that a lot of players are going to be underleading this texture. So if he checks, uh, you're checking back quite a high frequency. The texture is very, very connected. Um, 73% check back, 67s are checking back, but you can also, the solver also checks back a set of 8s, set of 9s, and pocket aces to protect the checking back range. Checks back some top pairs as well, 10-9, Jack-9, Queen-9. So the strategy is split between a big bet. Actually, in that case, the solver decides to go all in and check back. So the point is, the more he checks out of position and doesn't lead, the more you want to check back in position yourself. Now let's look at the turn. So turn is a king. Christoph checks. Do you think there is any reason to bet pocket sixes here?
I personally don't think so. Like I do think that sixes is still a very clear check. Even if I think he underleads the flop, and let's say to the extreme case where I want to check almost my entire range on the flop, I do think that I can have a betting range here. Even if he didn't lead the flop. But overall, I think as it's a turn that he's still gonna check also quite some strong hands on, I think it's overall a turn that I will still have to be decently passive on and not start going bananas. So I think pocket sixes is still a very, very clear check back. And yeah, let's go to the river.
River's a 4. And now Christoph thinks about value betting his hand. Probably he's thinking about a sizing. How often does he beat you once you check back twice? What hands are you checking back twice with on that texture that beat him? That is one question. And second is, how much are you going to call with, let's say, 9-3 off or 8-3 off that you isolated pre-flop as a bluff, or pocket sixes, pocket sevens? So these are the two most important questions, I think.
Yeah, so I do think that it's like I also kind of want to ask myself how often is he betting the turn here with range? Like, does he have hands like Jack 10 off in range that I would have assumed is shoving pretty often? How many I mean 9x he probably always has as played. Like it's easy to also check and not like randomize a 9x betting on turn. So, but now when I think about bluff catching, I also have to differentiate. Like blockers become quite important too. Like how many bluffs do I block with pocket sixes compared to a hand like, let's say I had, because I'm still gonna check a lot on the flop. As like if I think he underleads, which I think is a reasonable assumption here. Not saying he doesn't leap, but just slightly less. I'm gonna have a lot of better hands, like for example, pocket queens that still pot control the turn, and in my river arriving range. And as he's probably not bluffing any queen highs almost always, like or very little, then a hand like that becomes way better of a call than pocket sixes. Um, yeah, it's probably also in reality blocking slightly more bluffs than in theory, where we saw pre-flop he's shoving a lot of the suited 6x, which I think he might end up having here slightly more often as well. So looking back, I'm not happy with the call necessarily. Um, But yeah, I think my hand in theory is worth very little to zero, close to zero, and probably um yeah, calls a significant amount still. But yeah, I don't like the play as much with those blocker considerations as well, with the how the range probably looks in reality. So yeah, not as happy. Ended up calling though, and was one.
Yeah, it's interesting that poker is such a if-then game. We can almost disregard the solver to a big extent in this spot because it's more important how he plays. Well, he starts with a limp, with a hand that's almost pure shoving, and then he's checking the flop where he needs to be leading quite a lot. And now we're on the streets, right? So
Yeah,
if you assume that he's not leading the flop as much, you might as well check range on the flop,
yeah,
meaning that you have queens and jacks a lot more on the river, as you said, because those are going to be, these hands are going to be checking back the turn as well. And now you have to think about, am I blocking more bluffs with the sixes or I'm blocking more bluffs with the queens? Because when we're bluff catching the river, it's much more important to unblock bluffs than to block value. Because most people are going to think, oh, I'm blocking 6-7 here, which means that is a good bluff catcher. But no. So arriving on the turn, we do see small blind betting quite high frequency for a block bet. And you rightfully said that a lot of players will not find that strategy, will not find the block bet with a 9 on the turn, which is almost 100% with Queen 9, Jack 9, very high frequency with 10-9 as well. King 9 also almost pure, which leaves him with a lot more value bets on the river. So that is a very good point, and I really like how deep you're thinking about each and every spot. So once he checks, sixes and sevens are checking back. Even pocket aces is checking back sometimes to protect our checking back range. King deuce, king three, king 10 even checking back, just to show how important it is to protect our stack. And, how does the value threshold change here in these high risk premium spots? We're just value betting a much, much stronger range, starting from king jack pretty much as our worst value bet, but also using 9-7, which has great blocker properties and of course more equity than a pure 9. So check back, river is for hearts. And now Christoph is splitting between all the sizes really, from small block bet to B75. In game, he chose B75, which is uh, what the solver does with 10-9, splitting between half pot and B75. So that is certainly good enough for a value bet. Because if we look at your checking back range, you shouldn't really have all that many hands that beat 10-9. If you have a 9, you can have 9 deuce and 9 3, 8 deuce 8 3 off that are ISOing, pocket sixes, pocket sevens. So a lot of value to be gained with 10-9. And we see how good of a player he is, because most player would have went for a block bet here, I believe, and he found that big sizing. And once he bets here, we see we have a break-even spot with pocket sixes. The EV of calling is very, very, very close to zero. And we also do have a lot
yeah,
more strong hands in our checking back range, such as on the turn, such as aces, a bunch of king X that protects our range. And, even hands like 9-4, 8-4. So that's why sixes is indifferent. It's just not that high up our range. And this is why all the adjustments and all the
yeah.
assumptions about our opponents play a very significant role in that spot.
But yeah, it becomes a horrible call, like seeing this assume, because this still assumes he bets like all his 9x on the turn very often, and he's gonna have them way 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 more often. And I'm because I'm thinking he's slightly under leading flop. I have all these better hands to call with, so sixes becomes absolute torch probably in reality. And yeah, so it's just something to point out. Um, it's nice to think deeply about the game, but then ending up calling and leveling yourself, thinking it's still blind v blind, and it's easy to overbluff. It's not necessarily true for this specific spot if you really take your time and think deeply about it. So yeah.
Easy to say when you're looking at the solver and you have half an hour to solve one hand, but in game when you're playing,
Sure.
for big money on the big stage and you have just a minute to make a decision, you're usually simplifying in your head and just thinking, oh, how many bluffs am I blocking with a six? Uh, if he's raising jack six, queen six, king six, which is a good assumption pre-flop, then I'm not probably blocking as many bluffs. And that's how we simplify in our minds. And sometimes one argument seems too big in our minds, and then we lean for that decision. But yeah, certainly if we had more time and GTO Wizard in front of us, that would have changed
Yeah.
our mind.
Fun spot.
Fun spot. This is the last and I believe the most interesting hand of the review. You start by opening 2.6 big blinds from the cutoff, having the second stack against Christoph with the chip lead on the big blind. Um, would you say a word about why did you decide to size up here? Is that your default strategy, or you decided to play tricky here on the spot?
So no, like risk premium is a driver for that. And what I mean by that is in a spot like that, Christoph can put a significant amount of pressure on to me post flop, which means he can also defend a lot of hands. And I do want to make some of his marginal or like the weakest defense fold. So I actually want him to fold more hands. My range is also going to be significantly tighter than in a lot of other distributions. So as a byproduct, I do want to increase my size, which yeah, I decided to do here in form of a 2.6x open race.
I really like this adjustment. The higher the risk premium is for us playing against a bigger stack, or the higher the risk premium gap is, the more we want to size up with our opens. Um, and this is because if we think about post flop ICM and going back, from the river backwards, uh, when we're playing this spot, it's going to be really, really tough for us to bluff catch the river, especially if it's for our entire stack. It's also tough to thin value bet against the bigger stack. It's generally just very, very tough playing, especially with two shorter stacks. And that's why we want to disincentivize the chip leader from defending a very wide range preflop. And that's why we size up preflop. So really, really good find. And yeah, he has 4-3 suited, which although he should tighten his defending range, 4-3 suited seems like a hand that is almost never dominated and hitting very well on some textures, kind of tricky hand if you hit very well post flop. And he's hoping for ace 5 deuce, but let's see what happens.
Close to that. Here, one thing to quickly touch on. Christoph did not exactly see that I opened 2.6x, and the dealer had to tell him to throw in slightly more chips. I didn't in game see how big he thought the race would be, but I knew he thought it's slightly less. Something to keep in mind.
So we should assume that his defending range is slightly wider.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I think.
very interesting flop. For him, he doesn't really have a decision here on ace-9 deuce, although he has a chip lead and he's allowed to lead on many textures, as we've seen in the solver. This is not one of them. You have ace-king, king of diamonds. So guide us through your thought process here. Are you betting? What sizing are you betting? Are you considering checking also?
So yeah, first of all, it's a dry texture. It's a spot where if I want to be betting, it's usually for small size, not even considering the ICM implications. Here, in this specific spot, have a high risk premium against him being the chip leader. I guess it's like 16% ish, something like that. probably.
Correct.
And whenever that's the case, then my betting frequency across all boards will go down. My bet sizings will go down. I just don't want to play big pots against the chip leader in this very specific situation. So I'm gonna have a bunch of hands like pocket jacks, queens, kings that are very disincentivized to start building a pot against Christoph here. So right away I recognize also like a small heuristics I use is like the second card I think plays a role. I'm not gonna have offsuit 9x in this distribution. Like I think on an ace 10 deuce board where some of my bottom RFIs connect better, um, my betting frequency will increase. But here in this specific spot, I do think I need to have a significant checking range. And if I would bet, I personally would have min bet this spot. And now the question becomes, do I want to check a hand as strong as ace king? Sometimes I do think whenever I have a high checking frequency with my entire range, that I also sometimes have to have a really strong hand in my checking range. And ace king with a diamond is kind of nice, even though I think a diamond slightly prefers betting compared to not having a diamond, having added equity.
We do see the solver prefers the smallest bet, 25, and might even decide to min bet if we give it that option. But checking back is almost 50% because of that huge risk premium. You can see the ranges, the equities run in favor of the cutoff here by a big margin, 62-38 almost. But because we have a decent amount of hands that don't want to bloat the pot, such as kings, queens, and so on, we have to start developing a check backing range, which includes a lot of the lowest, the low kicker aces, but also eighth king. There is a jack of diamonds, one of the worst hands cards in the deck for us. We feel we have the best hand. Christoph almost always has the best hand with his flush here. And now the question is, what sizing does he pick? He goes for half pot, which seems okay. He could be going bigger as well, I believe. And then you have no decision here. Of course, you don't want to raise, have a raising range at all, especially at the final table. So pretty clear call.
Yeah, I agree. No races.
River is a deuce, which makes it even harder for us to get away from in that hand. But let's see the sizing. So Christoph goes for a slight overbet and puts the hoodie in front of his face. That is 110% pot. And now you have the biggest decision so far at this final table, and one of the biggest decisions you'll ever get playing poker, by the way. So very tough spot. Most people are just snap calling this without even thinking about it, having almost the top of their range. So what came through your mind? What went through your mind here? Were you thinking about turning that into a bluff maybe sometimes, or were you thinking about folding? What happened here?
Yeah, I was considering all options. Like, I was thinking for a second about, I mean, call is the most obvious option. Then you'd start thinking about fold. I think bluff jamming is something that you can consider. Um, but I got quickly away from that option as I think it's just not a super attractive spot as I have a lot of like potential easy bluffing candidates in form of like weak suited ace X, the ones maybe that block some of the full houses in form of ace two suited. I have like jack nine, ace nine. I have pocket kings with a suit potentially, even though that's might not be as great of a bluff. But so I got away from that option pretty fast, and then was in between calling or folding. And I personally, with the read that Christoph, I also thought he has thought it's a smaller raise pre, and on the turn, like his B50 size, the way I think he like I thought he has more of the 10 eights, queen eights, type hands that I do not want to interfere when bluff catching with. Like, let's say I have ace queen with a diamond. I think it's significantly worse than ace king with a diamond. But also, um, I thought that it's easy for that player type to potentially, especially on turn, choose this sizing with like, I thought he might use a slightly bigger sizing, even though, like, thinking deeply about it now, looking back, I think his sizing is good to just go medium and then medium to big-ish on the river. Because if we here's something that I want to touch on is the distribution in general. So whenever Christoph here loses a significant pot against me, the it shifts towards me being chip leader and him being handcuffed with the other two short stacks. So I think especially not only because of ICM and risk premium involvements, I think we need to be significantly or like I think sizings could even go down more than a solver would tell you, assuming or considering the bad future game in case you lose a big pot against the second in chips here. So I do think his sizing is pretty good actually. But in game I thought like it's kind of easy to go like medium size realize equity with your bluffs kind of, and I thought it's a spot where he has loads of natural bluffs, and the problem is he probably underbluffs the gut shots without the diamonds and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a very close spot. I ended up calling and trapped myself kind of on from the flop, where yeah, for sure like 1% human element at least came in where I checked back such a strong run and then just didn't fold the river, even though
Yeah.
it's very marginal.
It's really, really easy to fall in that trap, but you spent a time bank or two and you really gave it a decision with a hand that, as I said, most people see as a very clear call, very easy call. They're just one chip that. Yeah, it seems like you were thinking very deep in game and really trying to figure out how many bluffs and value are you blocking with the king of diamonds. So let's see what the solver thinks. So looking at the turn, nothing really surprising. He uses 4-3 diamonds all the time as a bet, but also 4-3 spades and 5-3 spades. So that's how the solver attacks here, unblocking the checking back range with a lot of gut shots and low cards, bluffing the turn. And of course, when he bets, we have a fairly easy call, very high EV. We're never really raising anything. All right, river is the deuce of spades, and we can see the solver going for a big size. We can actually add the 110%. And yeah, the solver is picking that sizing predominantly. You can see a lot of flushes are going in that size. Actually, that's the size that is almost entirely preferred with 4-3 diamonds. And what do we do here? Well, ace, king, king of diamonds is a plus CV call and pure calls in game. Thank you for the review and congrats to the biggest score in your career. Chopping that tournament with Christoph for, I believe, more than $4 million, a score that every poker player in the world dreams of. Really insightful to hear your thoughts about the game and about that specific final table. I learned a lot. I hope our viewers learned a lot too.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. I had a lot of fun, learned some things, and looking forward to the next one.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.